So for today, we should already know that all quadratics are written in the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, that's our first blank there. That is how we solved when it got to factoring, when it got to quadratic formula, all of that stuff. So this is the same format. It's not going to change. You're still going to want everything on one side before you graph. Okay? When you graph it, the only other things that we've graphed have been lines. You graph a linear equation, it makes a line. You graph a quadratic equation, and it's something called a parabola. Okay, it is U-shaped. The general shape of that. Okay? I'm just going to give you a sketch of the next two types of parabolas. You can have a parabola or a U-shape that looks something like this one, which is a U-shape going upwards.
Can we do it? Can we draw that?
What?
Can we draw that?
Yeah. You can draw that. Just draw a U-shape. That's all. Or you can have a U-shape facing downwards. Okay? All right, so the trick to knowing whether it's going to face up or down, okay, is this a value out front of your x squared. Okay? If you notice here, there's no number right here in front of our x squared, but that means it's a positive 1. So if a is positive, then the parabola opens up, or it is a U facing up, you can say like a smile. If, on the other hand, a is, like in this one, negative, because there's a negative 1 there, that parabola opens which way? Down. Okay? I'm going to erase this quick and move down the page. So if a is negative, then the parabola opens down. Any issues with that? All right, we have something called the axis of symmetry when we graph these. If you notice these U shapes that we've drawn, if you literally took your paper and folded them in half right down the middle of that U, they're going to match on either side. They're going to be symmetric or reflections of each other. So we have something called the axis of symmetry that divides the parabola or quadratic into two equal parts. We have a formula that we're going to use to find this, and it is x equals negative b over 2a, where b and a are still those numbers like we picked out of our quadratic, like we used for the quadratic formula. So a is still the number in front of the x squared, b is still the number in front of the x. You're not actually going to pull the x in. You're just going to use the number in front of it. So that's why we just put b. Okay? We also have another part to our quadratic called the vertex of it. The vertex is the highest or lowest point. Sometimes we call it the minimum or the maximum. Okay? Which is what these two blanks are. When the vertex is the lowest point, it is called a minimum. When the vertex is the highest point, it is called a maximum. So, to begin with, we're just going to practice finding the axis of symmetry in the vertex and drawing a sketch without having to do the other 5 points. Okay? So, I've given you an example here, x squared plus 8x plus 15. First, we need to know what our a, b, and c are, right? Just like quadratic formula. So what's my a? 1, b is, c is 15. So to find the axis of symmetry, I plug in x equals negative b over 2a. So what's negative b going to be? Negative 8 over 2 times now 1.
So with the negative, you make it opposite?
You make it the opposite of whatever b is. Yep. So if I just plug that in, that means my axis of symmetry is going to be what number? -4. Now, quick review of when we did graphing. Anyone remember what kind of line an x equals line is? It is a vertical line. So, on my sketch here, okay, I'm going to make myself a little XY sketch here. I have a tool for it. My axis of symmetry is at x equals -4. So that means from 0, 0, I'm going to go left 1, 2, 3, 4. And I am going to draw a vertical line there, like that. That is the middle of my U. That means half of my U shape is going to be to the left, half of my U shape is going to be to the right, always. Any issues so far with this?
What's the vertex?
The vertex is either the highest or the lowest point on the U. So what we have here, the vertex is always on the axis of symmetry somewhere. Okay? So what we have now is the x point of the vertex is -4. It shares the x value with the axis of symmetry always. Any ideas on if I have an x value, how I could use it to find a y value that goes with it?
Yes.
What could we do? I could go back to my equation and I could plug it in. Okay? So your original equation is x squared. What is my x value that I'm using to plug in? -4 squared plus 8 times what? -4 plus what? 15. So you're literally just plugging it into the equation to get a y value back out. So in this case, that gives me 16 minus 32 plus 15, which gives me -1 as my y value. Now we should know how to graph that point, right?
Yes.
Okay, -4, -1 is left 4, down 1. A good check, your vertex should always be on that line that you've drawn. If it's not, you've done something wrong. Well, we're about to see, because the last thing that we talked about is what our A value tells us. If our A value is positive, which way does it open? Up. So if I'm just drawing a brief sketch here, that means that from that vertex, 1/2 goes out and up to the right, 1/2 goes out and up to the left. They match halves on either side, but I know it goes up because that A value is +1, not negative. So what would we call that vertex, a maximum or a minimum?
Minimum.
It would be a minimum because it is the lowest point in the U. Think of it being as in a valley. Okay? We would call our vertex a minimum. This is like the bulk of what we're doing today. That again and again, multiple times. Questions on that?
What's the answer?
What is the answer?
Is the whole graph?
The graph is the answer. Yes.
There's not a number.
There will be. We're going to use the graphs to find answers for x equals later. Not today.
No, like quadratic equation.
We will, yeah. It's another way to solve it. However, we're not going to get into that today. Okay? Let's see it. All right. On the back of this page, we're going to get to this in a moment. That's going to be part of your homework where we just sketch. Wait, you don't have another page there, do you?
Hopefully not.
We have homework 1.
Nice job.
Hold. On this axis of symmetry, our formula is -b over 2a. So what's that going to look like here? -10 over 2 times -1, which is going to give me what for my axis of symmetry? +5, right? All right.
I knew that.
So when I am drawing a sketch, I start with my x and y axes, and I go over to +1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I draw what kind of line for this? Vertical line. So there's my vertical line for my axis of symmetry. That means half of my u will be on one side, half of it will be on the other. What else did we just get from that axis of symmetry? The x value of the vertex is 5. Let's review. What did we say about finding the y value? Plug it in. Now, here's the first one we have with a negative out front, so we're going to be careful with this. That is a -1 in front of the x squared. So when I plug it in, I lead with a negative, then 5 squared, plus 10 times 5, minus 23. Okay? So if I'm plugging this in, this is not necessarily something I'm going to let you use like your big calculators for, or any calculator, because this is just math. I mean, square the 5 first. Gives me -25 plus 50 minus 23. Remember, you would go left to right on this, so -25 plus 50 is 25. Minus 23 gives me what? 2, and that's my y value of my vertex. So if I'm graphing this, I'm then going to go up to 2 on my axis of symmetry and draw my vertex. To draw our basic sketch of this with no other points, we'll learn how to find the other points in another day here. We remember that our a value out front is what for this one? -1. It tells us that it opens which way? Down. So I draw one half of it facing down this way, and the other half of it on the other side. Okay? We're just sketching right now. We will have another day to learn how to find other points to make it the most accurate we can. But for right now, we're just starting with the basics, building this slowly. Okay? All right, take a minute now on number 3 on your paper. Identify A, B, and C, and set up and find just the axis of symmetry. Just that, and then stop. Okay? So don't go further than the axis of symmetry on that one.